My brothers and sisters in the Lord, in 2020, do you know how much money that consumers in the United States were conned out of through internet and social media schemes? Total, $4.3 billion. 4.3 billion with a B. I'm sure, my brothers and sisters, everyone in this church has received some sort of an invitation, either by email or text message or on social media, that involves someone looking for money. Maybe it was someone you knew. Maybe you got a text from Father Cooper that said, just buy some Amazon gift cards and send me the numbers. You know the schemes. Interesting story. A few years ago, a man by the name of Ben Taylor in Utah received a Facebook message from a gentleman in Liberia, a man by the name of Joel Willie. Joel Willie. And Joel Willie was trying to run a con, a scheme. It was one of those that are known as the advanced pay scheme. He was trying to convince Ben that he would come into this large amount of money, either an inheritance or a legal sum, but he needed to pay a few fees in order to get the money. And so he was trying to convince Ben to give him the money to pay these fees, and once the fees were paid and he got this large lump sum, he was going to split it with Ben. Now, Ben knew what was going on. He knew it was a con, it was a scheme, but he wanted to play along. And Ben actually had a YouTube channel, so he wanted to show those who were watching his channel how to avoid these types of traps. So he said to Joel Willie, he said, I would like for you to do something for me. I want you to send me some pictures of the sunset in Africa, and maybe we can work out a deal. Well, a strange thing happened. The next day, Ben received some snapshots, some photographs of the sunset in Africa. And Ben looked at them, and he said, these are pretty good. So he decided to take it one step further, continuing this story, the strange turns. He said to Joel Willie, I'm going to buy you a camera, and I'm going to ship it to you in Liberia. And I want you to take some even better photographs so maybe I can pay you for them. And guess what? He shipped the camera, and not long after, the photographs came back. And they were very, very good. And now Ben had a problem. He was now running his own con. And so he said he had to do something in order to rectify this situation. So he put together all these photographs in a book to sell it for the people who were watching on his YouTube channel. He sold them for $8 a book. I think he made about $1,000. The title of the first book was something that Joel Willie used in his Facebook instant message the first time he spoke to Ben. And the title was By the Grace of God. Actually, the way he wrote it was by D with the letter D, by D, grace of God. By the grace of God. And so this continued on. And so he got $1,000 from this first set of photographs. And with $1,000, he told Joel Willie, I'll give you some money, but we have to split it with a charity in Liberia. And Joel agreed. And so some money went to a hospital, and he sent some money to Joel. Well, as the years went on, my brothers and sisters, these two men formed a friendship. In fact, in 2018, before the pandemic, Ben traveled to Liberia to meet Joel Willie. The two men met. They took some more photographs together. They sold a second book, raised over $100,000, some for Joel and his family, and the other half going to charity. Why do I tell you that story, my dear friends? Because that story could have had a very different ending. It started off as a con, as a scheme, but it turned out to be a beautiful friendship. Only by the grace of God. My brothers and sisters, only by the grace of God do we have the endings of stories changed. Only by the grace of God, my brothers and sisters, what could have been something that was a con became something beautiful between these two men. Only by the grace of God, my brothers and sisters. And that's the theme I want to reflect on today, is the grace of God. Because you see, by the grace of God, my brothers and sisters, you and I are called to approach every situation and person in our lives. And when we do that, my brothers and sisters, the story of our life changes. The ending changes. The ending of the story of the lives of other people around us change. Why? Because if you look at Jesus in the Gospels, my brothers and sisters, he always approached every encounter from a standpoint of grace. He always approached every encounter from a standpoint of charity. He always approached every encounter from the standpoint of love. And it changed everything, even when it was tough love. And that's what we have in the gospel today. These teachings of Jesus, my brothers and sisters, are tough love. 3 of the most hardest words in the gospel: love your enemies. And some of us say, oh yeah, whatever. But Jesus meant it, my brothers and sisters. And the only way we can have the stories of our lives changed is if we approach everything from the standpoint of grace, from the standpoint of love. Even in this tough teaching where Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for those who hate you, bless those who curse you, give to those who are not going to repay you. If someone hits you on one cheek, give them the other. If someone takes your coat, give them your shirt. My brothers and sisters, those are difficult to live out. But we have to approach it as Jesus does. We have to approach it from the standpoint of charity, from the standpoint of love. For you see, my brothers and sisters, those teachings of Jesus are not meant for you and I just to get by in the world. They're not meant even just to get us ahead in this world. What we hear in the gospel today is propelling us, my dear friends, to another world, another kingdom. Because the kingdom of God and the kingdom of the world are often, my brothers and sisters, in an opposite direction. And what Jesus is telling us and instructing us in the gospel goes against every fiber of the kingdom of the world. But Jesus is not telling us what we need just for this world, my friends, but for another world and another kingdom, to build the kingdom of God from the standpoint of love, from the standpoint of grace, from the standpoint, my dear friends, of charity in your life and in mine, which changes everything. Do we approach it like that, my brothers and sisters? For you see, my dear friends, oftentimes people tell me, especially recently, last few years, my father, it's so difficult to be Catholic, or it's so difficult to be Christian because everything seems so restrictive. We have all these rules. Jesus gives all these rules. It's just restrictive. But my brothers and sisters, have you ever thought for a moment that by the grace of God, it is a blessing when things are restrictive? I'll give you an example. Say you have to go to the Wally Mart down the street, or maybe the Target, and you get there, my brothers and sisters, and you need something simple like deodorant. I don't care what the Europeans say, you need deodorant. And so you go to the aisle, and you have all these choices. Do you want spray-on? Do you want stick? Do you want rolling guide? Do you want gel? Do you want this scent and that scent? There's thousands of choices. And you sit there and you look and you say, I have no idea what to choose. But you don't have that with Jesus. Jesus in the gospel says there is only one way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. There's only one direction, there's only one choice, and that's from the standpoint of love. You see, my brothers and sisters, that form of being restrictive is a great blessing. Because Jesus says there's not just many ways, just take whatever way you want, and we'll all be happy and sing kumbaya. No. There's one way, and it is the way of love. And when we talk about this love, my brothers and sisters, that Jesus is speaking about in the gospel, 3 characteristics stand out. And those 3 characteristics, or 3 of the characteristics that I just want to speak to you today about, are these. First, my brothers and sisters, is this: that love must be one that is self-sacrificial. It has to be a self-sacrificial form of love. It has to be a love, my brothers and sisters, that is courageous. Because if the love is not courageous, it cannot be self-sacrificial. Look at the lives of the martyrs. They were willing to give their life for the proclamation of the gospel. And we don't have to look far to find martyrs. Just a few weeks ago, a 30-year-old Dominican priest was killed hearing confessions in Vietnam. He was murdered with a hatchet or a machete right there in the confessional. He hasn't been declared a martyr by the church, but he certainly could be considered a martyr of the confessional, my brothers and sisters. It is being able to have a courageous love to proclaim the good news in season and out of season, even when it comes to those who we consider to be our enemies, those who we rather curse rather than pray for, as Jesus commends us in the gospel. So first, the love has to be courageous. It has to be self-sacrificial. The second thing, my dear friends, is that the love has to be generous, a generous love. Do you know, my brothers and sisters, that charity or love is the engine that fuels generosity? When we love, my brothers and sisters, when we're filled with charity, we are fueled to be generous because we don't hang on to our time, our talents, and our treasures, but we're willing to give them in the service of God and His church and His people. But you see, my brothers and sisters, on the opposite side of that, fear. Fear is the engine of stinginess. It is the engine of stinginess because when we are afraid, then we're stingy with all of my stuff because I might not have enough for me, because I'm afraid to walk out on faith. Fear is the engine of stinginess, and nothing can be accomplished in the kingdom when we are in fear. But we're called to have that generous love. A man by the name of Chuck Collins. Chuck Collins. He is the great-grandson of Oscar Mayer. You know Oscar Mayer. He was the German immigrant who had the famous meatpacking company. I'm thinking of the song right now. Oh, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer wiener. That is what I really want to be. Okay, I'm digressing. But Chuck Collins. Chuck Collins is the great-grandson of Oscar Mayer. Chuck Collins was slated to inherit a huge fortune from his trust fund when he reached a certain age. But he decided to give it all away. Why? What motivated him? A group of individuals who had homes in a trailer park motivated him. This is how the story went. The landowner where these trailers were wanted to sell the property. And by selling the property, all of the individuals who had their homes in this trailer park would have to leave. They would have to disperse. The community would be destroyed unless they could come up with the money. And I believe at the time it was $30,000 for this land. And so all of them began to put in. All these different families. Those who could afford more, put in more. Those who could not afford anything, they didn't put in anything. Their neighbors put up for them. And that community raised the $30,000 they needed to save the land, to purchase it, to save the community. My brothers and sisters, that is a generous love. That's what it means, my brothers and sisters, because when Chuck Collins saw that, he said, I want to be in a community like that. I want to be in a family like that, where people give and sacrifice for one another for the good of the whole. And so he gave everything away, his whole Oscar Mayer fortune. Love has to be courageous. Love has to be generous. And love has to be, my dear friends, unconditional. Unconditional. What does Jesus say in the gospel? Don't just give to someone who can pay you back. Even sinners do that. Don't just love people who love you. Even sinners can do that. Don't just do good for people who do good things for you. Even sinners do that. But it's called to be a love that doesn't put any conditions on it. I love whether you love me, whether you like me, whether you're my friend, your acquaintance, my family member. I even love you if you hate me, if you spit on me, if you utter every kind of evil against me. Because that's the standpoint, my brothers and sisters, of what it means to be a disciple of the Lord. And so, my dear friends, as we continue this journey of discipleship, may we always approach every situation from the standpoint of grace, from the standpoint of God's love. And only if we do that can we ever understand how Jesus can use those three words: love your enemies.